Hi everyone, this is Golden Buckets. Welcome to my channel. In this audio, I will discuss another interesting topic. As you all know, in the last video I talked about Russell Westbrook. I tried to explore and assess his legacy and primarily his reputation as a superstar based on the use of facts and in an unbiased way. In this audio, I will talk about a very interesting topic. I will talk about one of the current players in the league, one of the superstars, one of the arguably three best players in the league, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And the reason why I'm making this video is to shed light on some of the things about Giannis' game that are very underdiscussed in the basketball community, and in which my opinion are necessary to point out when someone attempts to gauge his legacy, his role in the all-time greatest players, and even in comparisons to other power forwards such as Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley. And I do believe that for some reason, discussions about Giannis on social media, on ESPN, on the national news media, either discussions or opinions that are pro-Giannis or anti-Giannis are both very simplistic. They fail to capture the complexity of this player. I disagree with multiple people on the Giannis Antetokounmpo topic. Some people that are pro-Giannis to extreme levels, some people that are anti-Giannis to an incredible degree, and my only concern is to give the gods of basketball their due. What does it mean? To critique a player in a very fair way and without resorting to fandom characterization of a player, either elevating a player to an all-time status before it is due, or even to diminish a player's play style and contributions and impact to winning games. So now let's talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Before delving on my critiques of Giannis, I just want to specify that I do believe that currently, and I'm recording this audio in late November 2023, I believe Giannis Antetokounmpo is a top 3 player overall in the Basketball Association, and you could make an argument based on the month of the year, based on the specific matchup, that he could be the best player in the league. His resume in the past few years have been quite outstanding. He has been league MVP twice, defensive player of the year in the same year, as one of those MVPs, a champion most importantly, and the finals MVP. So Giannis Antetokounmpo, before I delve into my critiques of him, I do believe he's a top 3 player. And if you asked me who would I draft if I had the number 1 pick in a hypothetical draft, I would answer to you Jokic, Steph, or Giannis right now, this November 2023. I will draft one of these 3 players. I will go with Jokic first, and I will be quite undecided between the number 2 pick, if I will pick Giannis or I will pick Steph. For my franchise, I probably lean towards Steph, but just to clarify, I'm not a Giannis hater. I do believe he deserves his respect as one of the best players in the league, and I do not mind people calling Giannis already a top 5 or 4 power forward ever. So my critiques are not necessarily a lot about Giannis himself, about what he does, but more so about the way he's discussed and the way I believe he's slightly elevated above what he should be. So first of all, to give you a profile on Giannis Antetokounmpo, let's start with off the court. I believe that Giannis might have the best intangibles in the league. He's a selfless leader, he works hard, he wants to improve his teammates. He's one of the superstars who really cares about winning, yes, which is something that unfortunately it is becoming increasingly rare in today's league. So Giannis is almost like a throwback player, a breath of fresh air in this league that is characterized by, I don't know, load management, players teaming up, lack of focus towards winning, players concerned with individual stats. So I do believe that Giannis is a breath of fresh air in this league. I do believe his intangibles are top-notch. He's a 10 out of 10 in that department. He's competitive, he has great work ethic, he shows up to work, he always tries his best on the basketball court. Doesn't matter if he's winning or losing a series. Even in the playoff series that he loses, you are never left with the impression that Giannis didn't try hard in that series where he lost. Giannis always gives 100%. Doesn't matter if he wins the game or loses the game. And for all of these reasons, primarily due to intangibles, Giannis Antetokounmpo is unquestionably a top 3 pick if I were to draft among all players in the league currently. And one of the reasons why Giannis will end up as high as he will be in the all-time great list. But so where do my criticism of Giannis lie? It is primarily on the game. So as I stated before, if we remove the intangibles for a second, okay? And I believe Giannis has the greatest intangibles in the league, and strictly focus on basketball, about his game, his talent, his ability to impact winning, I still believe Giannis will be top 5 player, okay, as a disclaimer, but I don't believe he will be as great as he is right now. And let me explain why. So there are a few aspects of Giannis' game that, in my opinion, as an analyst covering multiple players of this era, from the Steph, the KDs, the Kawhis, the LeBron, the Luka, the Jokic, all the way back to the 80s, pretty much. I've come across thousands of players that I've analyzed. Some of them resemble each other, some are completely new, some reinvented new positions, some are unicorns, some represent a prototype that departs from the traditional role played by players of that position. So I got experience over the years in analyzing players that played in different decades about different type of basketball players, and the more you understand about how the game of basketball works, the less you will be convinced that Giannis Antetokounmpo, as great as he is, could be considered better than a player like a Nikola Jokic, for example, or of a LeBron James, or even in the playoffs of a Kawhi Leonard. And I want to explain the reasons why. So let's examine Giannis Antetokounmpo's basketball profile. So let's not talk about career, accolades, trophies won, championships, rings. Let's not talk about accolades. Let's simply focus on the basketball player, what he provides, what he doesn't provide, what are his strengths, his weaknesses, how he impacts winning, okay? So Giannis Antetokounmpo, first of all, let's talk about the two areas of the game, defense and offense. So let's start by offense. Okay, so I do believe that Giannis Antetokounmpo's game, okay, and I'm not someone who engages in that hooper rhetoric that you have no bag, if you don't look like Kyrie or Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford, if your game isn't flashy, I will undervalue it. That is a BS series of arguments to make about any basketball player, let alone one of the greats of this era like Giannis Antetokounmpo. So my issue with Giannis is not so much about the lack of bag or lack of guard skills like players like KD or AD, even some of his peers, Joel Embiid. I don't have any complaint towards Giannis for his absence of a deep package of skills on the offensive end. That isn't my critique of Giannis. Okay, so Giannis essentially is a physical specimen. So Giannis is obviously more athletic, stronger, more powerful, more explosive. He runs the court, he dunks better than any other player, arguably, in the association. And I always say to basketball players, always work towards your strength. Don't try to change your game completely to try to fit something else. And I even defended Giannis to this degree because I do believe that people who want to turn Giannis and his persona, his prototype as a player, about a very powerful, athletic slasher to the rim, people who want to turn him into something he's not, like a 6'11" finesse player, like a KD, like a jump shooter, like a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant. In my opinion, these people are very misguided. Because Giannis Antetokounmpo, in my opinion, and this applies to every basketball player, should always work towards their strengths, not their weaknesses. They should never. It is true that I always vouch for players improving everything in their repertoire, their weaknesses. This is very important. But if you are a player that is an all-time great in one category, which is driving to the basket, why would you want to sacrifice some of that to become like a three-point shooter? It doesn't make much sense because oftentimes people don't understand that if you get stronger in an area that you're weaker, then the area where you're stronger, you do not rely on it as much as you are right now. And this, in totality, could make you a little bit weaker. Imagine if Giannis Antetokounmpo developed some of the skills that Joel Embiid has in terms of mid-range shooting and three-point shooting. In my opinion, Giannis' value wouldn't increase, will diminish a little bit, because he will then be forced to rely more on those areas where he will become hypothetically good but not proficient, and he will begin neglecting what made him Giannis Antetokounmpo in the first place, which was his ability to attack the rim, to drive to the basket, and pretty much being an unstoppable transition force. And this is the same argument that I made in the past when I talked about Michael Jordan and the three-point shot. Yes, I do believe Michael Jordan, obviously, with the talent he has, his work ethic, determination, desire to improve, obviously, I believe that Michael Jordan would have become a very good three-point shooter in today's league. But I don't believe that Michael Jordan would rely on that like most players today are. Even players who are not known to be good three-point shooters like LeBron, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic. I don't believe that MJ will become that. Why? Because by doing that, he would lose a little bit of what made him Michael Jordan. His ability to destroy defenses, both attacking the rim and with mid-range shooting, fadeaways and post-game and so forth. If Michael Jordan included three-point shooting to a better degree in his repertoire, then he would simply stop becoming Michael Jordan in some of the areas that made him what he is, which was the greatest mid-range shooter ever, the greatest post player by a non-big in NBA history. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to ask a player to dramatically change their game like many people are asking Giannis to do. So I defended Giannis in that aspect. I do not have complaints towards Giannis for being limited as a scorer when instead he is someone who focuses on his strength, which is attacking the rim. So why then I have some complaints about Giannis on the offensive end? So here's the thing, okay? I do believe that Giannis, and this is not his fault. I'm not blaming him as a person or as a player, but I do believe he's quite a big beneficiary of the whistle compared to other stars in the league and compared even to big men forwards, power forwards of the past. For example, you can think almost about every power forward from the Charles Barkley, the Dirk Nowitzki, the Kevin Garnett, the Jokic, even the Anthony Davis. In my opinion, that Giannis' value on the court, his effectiveness, and how great it is. In my opinion, it is slightly boosted by how he's refereed. What does it mean by that? As you know, free throws are a part of the game. This is without a doubt, you know. But what I noticed after following multiple games, watching thousands of hours on Giannis over the years, this includes even the NBA Finals, where he had quite a favorable whistle, is that Giannis, and geniusly I have to remark, is manipulating the rules of officiating. And this is a little bit of a paradox because I remember years ago when Giannis and James Harden, this was in 2019, were in the MVP race, right? Some of the critics of Harden were pointing out that Harden's as a scorer was slightly overvalued because Harden learned to manipulate the rules. He learned how to get the calls from the whistle from the refs, right? He always had the best whistle, and as a result, Harden could go to the free throw line 15 times a game. There were stretches of games where going to the free throw line 15 times a game was the norm for Harden, okay? And everyone criticized it about Harden. They said, yes, his numbers offensively are as good as Michael and Kobe Bryant, but effectively, when you examine the game of a Harden, you realize that the way he gets many easy points is by manipulating the game. It isn't by really destroying defenses or putting defenders at a disadvantage. But almost no one pointed the same thing about Giannis Antetokounmpo, which I believe Giannis is a much better player than James Harden. But what I noticed after watching thousands of hours of his game is that he seems to have one of the best whistles that I have ever seen. Now, you're going to ask yourself, golden buckets, yes, but every dominant player who relies on physicality is more bound to get more calls than other players, right? And my answer to this is it depends. For example, Dwight Howard and Shaquille O'Neal in their prime, they used to go to the line multiple times a game. There were games where they used to go 15, 20, 25 times a game to the line. But what is different? Other teams were fouling them intentionally, okay? Because they knew that they were very poor free throw shooters, shooting around 50% from the line. So the strategy implemented by other teams was the hack a Shaq or the hack a Dwight, whereby other teams would pretty much other defenders will get fouls simply to send Dwight or Shaq to the line, so they will miss their free throws. It will hurt their team and give them a better chance of beating the teams that, like the Orlando Magic and the LA Lakers, where this type of players like Shaq and Dwight played. So the reason why they went to the line so many times was due to intentionality. Our goal is to foul you every time so that you go to the free throw line and you miss a large chunk of your free throws. The difference I noticed with Giannis is that so in the Shaq example and in the Dwight example, Shaq it wasn't the fault of them as offensive players. They went to the line a lot simply because the defenders fouled them a lot. So Dwight going to the line 25 times, in my opinion, was just and warranted because it was a strategy that the other team implemented against him. It wasn't Dwight that was committing the fouls offensively. It was the other team that guarded him and fouled him, so he went to the line 15, 20 times a game. The difference, however, with Giannis is that it is not always, in fact, I would say it is very rare, actually, unless we are talking about a very physical series like the Celtics Bucks semifinals in 2022. That was a very physical series, but for the most part, particularly in the regular season, it is very rare that you see Giannis getting really fouled by the defenders, okay? So when Giannis goes to the line 15, 20 times a game, it is mostly not the contact that is created by the defender trying to guard Giannis. No, it is Giannis that creates all of the contact. So what does Giannis do? And he's very smart about it. That's why I don't criticize him. I'm simply stating that his effectiveness is boosted to a large degree by how he's officiated compared to stars of the past and even some stars today, okay? So Giannis drives to the basket, okay? And he's the one creating the contact. He's the one technically committing the foul. But Giannis doesn't get called for it. And so what are the consequences of Giannis manipulating the game to a degree? There are three main consequences that people don't pay attention enough to. Number one, it puts the other team in foul trouble. Because if Giannis is smart and he's doing it every single time, and he knows he will get the best whistle for him, because other defenders are hopeless. They cannot even defend him because he's the one that's committing the offensive foul. Okay, so the number one benefit of this that Giannis gets is, number one, he's putting opposing teams in foul trouble. Okay, so this is the number one benefit of how he's officiated compared to many superstars of the past. Number one. Number two, not only he puts in foul trouble opposing defenders, oftentimes even when they didn't do nothing that deserves or warrants being thrown out of the game. The second benefit that Giannis gets is that he gets to go to the line as many times as he wants. Now, I know that there is this reputation of Giannis as a very poor free throw shooter, even though most seasons he shot around 70% or 68%, which, for context, it isn't too far off from what prime LeBron James was averaging from the line, or Luka Doncic was averaging from the line a few years ago, around the 70% mark, which it is not excellent, but it is not even bad. Just for context, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan, if you check their free throw percentage, it was never as great as people make it out to be. Obviously, it was much, much, much better than players like the Shaq, the Will Chamberlain, who really were terrible at it. But the great centers of the past, like Hakeem, like Kareem, were never exceptional free throw shooters. So Giannis shooting 70% from free throw isn't really as terrible as people make it out to be. However, back to my point. So the second benefit of Giannis, in addition to sending his defenders into foul trouble, is that he gets to the line so many times. And this is, you don't know how impactful and game-altering is when a player gets sent to the line almost all the time. Because Giannis gets a lot of N1s, so his 2-point plays become 3-point plays all of a sudden. And let's say he's shooting 20 free throws in a game, and he makes 15. It makes it much easier than to average 30 a game, in my opinion, because just a few dunks or layups plus an enormous amount of free throws each game is quite helpful in securing a 30-point game. So, okay, so there are two benefits to Giannis' playstyle, as I said. Sending your opponents into foul trouble, going to the free throw line multiple times, and therefore getting extra points. Number three is this. Giannis never gets called for the offensive foul. So what does it mean? If Giannis gets officiated correctly, in my opinion, he wouldn't be in the game by the third quarter. And I'm saying this as someone who loves Giannis and admires him. But if you are completely honest, when Giannis drives into the defender and he's the one committing the foul, if he was called for it as an offensive foul, I don't believe Giannis will be on the court by the third quarter, because all that Giannis do primarily is drive to the basket, work towards his strengths. And I'm sure that if you count the amount of drives he makes in the first two quarters, that alone will put him into foul trouble and get him almost at risk of fouling out in the game. So why I'm saying all of these things about Giannis' offensive game? As I stated before, I like when players impose themselves physically. I like when players work towards their strengths and don't try to become something they're not, such as jump shooters. But the reason why Giannis, in my opinion, is 25% better as a basketball player than he should be, in my opinion, is because of how he's officiated. For example, if I were to compare Giannis to Anthony Davis, okay, and I believe that Giannis is a better player, but if we are being completely honest, okay, if Giannis was officiated correctly, according to the rulebook, which means he was called for offensive fouls, and as a result, he will not get all of the free throws he gets. He will not put his defenders into foul trouble. He will risk he himself of fouling out due to committing these fouls. Does anyone believe that if Giannis was officiated correctly, that he will be better than Anthony Davis? I personally don't think he will be. I believe they're both exceptional, phenomenal talents. Obviously, Giannis gets the nod for a variety of reasons, but I do believe that Giannis' game gets a 25% boost by the officials compared to most stars in the league. And you could say, yes, but you could argue that other players like Kevin Durant, who's a jump shooter, gets to the line quite a lot compared to the contact he receives. And this also is a difference between other superstars. And you could say that this issue is not restricted to Giannis. My answer to you will be this. Yes, it is true that many superstars get superstar calls, and some don't. Like Steph Curry and Nikola Jokic notoriously are known for not going to the line enough. Like Jokic, who plays all of his game, or predominantly most of his game in the post, leading the league in shots in the post and in the paint, he's probably the superstar in the league with the least amount of calls, right? So he rarely goes to the free throw line. I think for this season, he's going to the line 6 times compared to 12 times by Giannis or Joel and other stars. So yes, there are stars like Jokic, like Steph, who almost never go to the line as much as they should. But on the other hand, and there are players like KD who go quite a lot to the line. But here's the difference. Going to the line is not a major part of even players like KD's game. But Giannis' game, his entire game is predicated on this dynamic. I drive to the basket, even though my defender is not fouling me, he receives a foul, and me, when I'm committing the offensive fouls, I will never be called for it, and as a result, I become more effective in a basketball game because I'm able to rinse and repeat this process, which, in my opinion, in basketball terms, should not be allowed, in my opinion. It should not be even rewarded by the referees because it is a way of playing basketball that really defies some of the rules of the game. So I give credit to Giannis for being smart and understanding that there is a big gap in the officiating of today's league and to get advantage of it. So now back to the discussion about Giannis, okay? And what are the areas where I believe he's slightly overrated? As I said before, in totality, I believe he's a top 3 player in the league. But in the playoffs, if I had to choose a player for a playoff series, I'm not sure he will be top 4. And I will explain my reasons for it in a second. So, as I stated already, one of the things that I believe is overrated about Giannis is his effectiveness. Yes, Giannis is a great basketball player. He is athletically gifted as anyone who ever played. He can impact the game to such a high level. However, I do believe that if he was officiated according to the rule book, he wouldn't be the dominant force and stoppable player that he currently is. So in my opinion, Giannis gets boosted by how he's officiated. This is number one. Number two, what is the other boost that Giannis has that most players in the league, like most superstars like Steph, KD, LeBron, they do not have? The spacing. Now, why this is important in my opinion? It is quite important because this league that we play in today, right, that oftentimes features NBA lineups that go 5 out, right? In my opinion, this league is very conducive to athletic freaks. What do I mean? Players who are amazing at driving are meant for this league, in my opinion. Not only this league that we play in today, the rules, the type of play styles that are featured in today's NBA, not only they feature great shooters like the Ray Allens, the Reggie Millers, but they also are the ideal. They are the ideal type of league for players that are uber athletic at driving and slashing to the rim. Players like Prime D-Wade, players like Giannis Antetokounmpo as of now. That's why I believe that D-Wade, if he was in his prime in today's league, he likely would average 34, 35 points a game, I believe. At least 32 a game. Because he was so adept and so exceptional at driving the basketball that I don't see how in today's league, with all the spacing, he wouldn't take advantage of it the same way that Giannis does. So, as you all know, each era of basketball is different. There are areas where there are strengths that are weaknesses in other areas where their weaknesses turn into strengths. But what do I notice about Giannis' game offensively is that, and as I stated before, I don't believe that Giannis should become a Kevin Durant or a 3-level scorer, a shooter. No, I like a player that works towards his strengths. However, most of his strengths are exacerbated by the type of league he plays in. Giannis' game is all based on the driving game, really. And the driving lanes are open for him to succeed to a much higher degree in today's league compared to past eras. And I'm not saying this to diminish Giannis, but having observed and watched thousands of hours about the NBA in different eras, I do not believe that, for instance, Giannis in the 90s will be as good as a player like Karl Malone. Because Karl Malone didn't, and the players like him, like Charles Barkley, they weren't lucky to be drafted in a league where the lane for driving, for a freak athlete, for a good runner, for someone who is as physically imposing as Giannis and the Charles Barkleys, the Karl Malones, these type of players who are exceptional transition players, they will feast into this league. And I don't believe that Giannis will have such an easy job if he played in previous eras. And I'm not simply talking about the 80s, the 90s, but even the 2000s and the early 2010s. Giannis' game isn't versatile enough, in my opinion. For example, LeBron James, when he was in his first stint in Cleveland and when he was in Miami, yes, it is true he was never a Kobe Bryant type of player in terms of skill sets, in terms of moves, in terms of counters. But LeBron's game, even in his early career in Cleveland, was much more refined than Giannis Antetokounmpo. So even though LeBron was, like Giannis, an exceptional driver to the rim, a team couldn't really, didn't have the same, how to say, it wasn't as easy for teams to stop LeBron as it is Giannis. Because LeBron was able to impact the game in so many more ways offensively than Giannis does. The point is this: we have already seen in the playoffs how Giannis can be rendered less effective offensively when he faces a good defensive team like the Miami Heat with Bam Adebayo. This already occurred twice in the playoffs, or when he faces teams like the Raptors that have good defensive bigs that can block some of the driving lanes. So if we have seen Giannis already diminish a little bit in those circumstances, imagine how he will fare in a league where almost every team played like the Raptors or like the Miami Heat that knocked him out of the playoffs. Almost every team played like that defensively. So Giannis will encounter zones, he will encounter lanes, the driving lanes will be clogged. He will not have the ability to drive from half court or to your step to the basket. So this is my criticism of Giannis. Giannis is an exceptional player, a hard worker, a great leader that, in my opinion, was born in the perfect era for him and for his play style. Because not only he can generate easier points by driving to the basket and manipulating a little bit the rules of the game, as I stated before, but also because he plays in an era with so much spacing that really it is like a basketball heaven for a player like him. So if you're asking me, will Giannis be a top 5 player in any other era? I don't believe so, honestly. Because Giannis' game is predicated on these key attributes. You know, the manipulation of the rules, which I applaud him for that, and I'm not critiquing him. I'm simply stating the obvious. And number 2, playing in an era that is really conducive to drive into the basket due to the amount of space by both teams on the floor, which helps him in attacking the rim to a much higher level and efficiency than he will do otherwise. So now that I stated what makes Giannis a little bit, in my view, slightly overrated offensively, I will talk about what some people in the basketball community fail to grasp about Giannis Antetokounmpo defensively. So there has been this narrative ever since 2019, when Giannis won his first MVP, just 1 year before he won the Defensive Player of the Year, that Giannis is arguably the best defensive player in the league. Giannis is a top 5 offensive player, and he's the best defensive player in the league. Which in my opinion, and I'm saying this as someone who loves Giannis, in my opinion, this narrative is quite false, that Giannis is the best defensive player in the league. And to be honest with you, I don't think that Giannis really is a top 8 defensive player in the league. Like, he's not as impactful defensively as his former teammate, Drew Holiday, as a Draymond Green, as a Bam Adebayo, as an Anthony Davis, as an Evan Mobley, as a Jaren Jackson Jr. There are so many players, in my opinion, that impact the game to a much higher degree defensively than Giannis. Now, so I will probably have Giannis around 9th or 10th in the league as a defender, but I wouldn't go as far or remotely close to stating he's the best defensive player in the league. That is absolutely far-fetched. Now, I'm not stating this to diminish Giannis again, because I believe that Giannis provides value defensively. I just don't believe it is to the same degree that the majority of the best defensive players in the league is. And I will make an example. So defensively, Giannis is very good in terms of help side defense, okay? He played a role similar to LeBron in the Miami Heat, in his Miami Heat tenure, whereby LeBron's primary role was being a help side shot blocker, okay? He was good at chase down blocks. He was never someone who anchored the paint or protected the rim thoroughly in a playoff series, even though his athletic ability made him such a powerful athlete that helped him in that department. Because oftentimes, being a great athlete, being having a high vertical, being physically imposing are attributes that can help you on the defensive side. So I'm not arguing that Giannis isn't a good or great defender. What I'm saying is that I believe that his value as a defender is highly overstated. So let's talk about the 2 main areas of defense, okay? Perimeter defense, which in the playoffs becomes hugely important. Am I wrong to say that I believe that Giannis is actually a below average perimeter defender? Anytime the Milwaukee Bucks have struggled in the playoff series, it was due to Giannis' inability to guard the other team's best players. Whether it was the Jimmy Butlers, we saw this in 2020 in the bubble, we saw it in 2023, last year in the playoffs, in the first round. Giannis' inability to cover these offensive players, the best scorers on the other teams, which primarily are perimeter players, is something that really held back the the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, Giannis played amazing, I just want to state, overall. But as a pure defender, I don't think that Giannis really has that great of an impact defensively in a playoff series, particularly when facing the best scorers in the league. So Giannis, again, if Giannis was truly top 5 defensive player, then he wouldn't mind taking harder and more challenging defensive assignments, such as guarding a Jimmy Butler. So for this reason alone, how can you compare Giannis defensively to an Anthony Davis? Anthony Davis in the bubble was guarding everyone. He was guarding Damian Lillard against the Blazers. He was guarding Jokic a little bit. He was guarding Jamal Murray against the Nuggets. Always in the bubble, he guarded Jimmy Butler in the NBA Finals, Bam Adebayo. So you can definitely see the impact of Anthony Davis as a defensive player in a playoff setting. I don't think that Giannis comes even close to that, honestly. So I've stated then that his defensive impact, particularly on the perimeter, is almost non-existent. So someone will say, okay, Giannis is not a great perimeter defender, but he's a great rim protector, right? Well, that is not even true, really. Like Giannis is a good rim protector as a forward, but not as a big man. Like Giannis, as I stated before, is good at help side defense. But I'm not sure that if you remove Brook Lopez from the team, that Giannis could anchor a team defense like a Dwight Howard in his prime, like Anthony Davis does for the Lakers right now, like many players really do, like Jaren Jackson for the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't think that Giannis is as good as a rim protector. Yes, Giannis is, as I said before, very athletic, very gifted physically, quite versatile, but he isn't as exceptional in none of the major defensive attributes. He's a below-average perimeter defender, and he's a very good but not excellent rim protector. Certainly not to the degree that an Anthony Davis, a prime Tim Duncan were. And he's not even like a KG. Like KG wasn't. KG was a jack of all trades. KG could defend the perimeter, defend the interior without being exceptional at each of those things. But Garnett's defensive impact was much, much, much higher than what Giannis has shown over the last few years. And as said before, being the 9th or 10th best defensive player in the league is still very impressive. And I commend Giannis for that. I just believe that in basketball discussions, his defensive ability gets overvalued quite a lot. So as I mentioned, as I try to summarize everything said until now, I believe Giannis is likely overrated offensively due to the era he plays in and how he's refereed. And defensively, I don't believe he's a game changer on defense like a Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard. He's nowhere near close to the great centers and power forwards of all time on the defensive side of the ball. So now that I've established these two notions on the offensive end and on the defensive end, I want to get to my last major point about this video on the last area where I think Giannis gets a little bit overrated, which is the championship. Now, I want to make a disclaimer, okay? I'm a Giannis fan. I rooted for him to win the title in 2021 when the Bucks beat the Suns in the NBA Finals because I love the story about a player winning without recruiting other superstars, a player remaining with a small market team, a player striving with a franchise that drafted him and raised him and winning a title with that franchise, okay? So I definitely admire Giannis and I rooted honestly for the Bucks to win the title. But if I'm completely honest, okay, and I know that every championship could have an asterisk, arguably, but I believe that Giannis Antetokounmpo, the only two championships that I consider the less meaningful in the last 20 years at least are the two of the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, when their teams were stacked beyond belief, where once they signed KD, there was no debate or dispute even that they were going to win the championship that year. We already knew in October that they would have won the title come June when it comes to in the summer, okay? So I do believe that Giannis' title is much, much more impressive than both of KD's titles. I'm not denying that. But if we compare his titles to most championships that I've seen, and I'm trying to be completely honest here, I believe that Giannis' title is one of the least impressive ones, and I want to explain why. First of all, okay, as you all know, the year after the bubble was a very challenging year, where most of the teams who played in the bubble until the end, such as the Lakers, the Miami Heat, came into the next following season out of shape. Really, winning or advancing to the finals in the bubble undermined these players and these teams' following seasons because they were struck by injuries, they didn't have recovery time, etc. So Milwaukee beating the Miami Heat in the first round, in my opinion, I don't consider it even as impressive because the Miami Heat were really a much, much, much worse version in 2021 than they were in 2020, 2022, 2023, where they weren't injured or had conditioning issues. So I don't value really that series against the Miami Heat. The second series against Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets, I have to be honest with you, okay? And I rooted for Milwaukee to win because I don't like the notion of a super team with three superstars winning that way. It doesn't seem right to me. However, in all honesty, I believe that the Brooklyn Nets would have beaten the Bucks in that series had they stayed injury-free, okay? So that year, in my opinion, the Milwaukee Bucks was a top 10 team in the league. But there are a few teams that got injured along the way that, in my opinion, they wouldn't have beaten by any means. Let me explain what these teams are. In the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns were the perfect team to face in the finals for this Milwaukee Bucks team. I do not believe they would have beaten the Golden State Warriors, which were out with injuries that year. The Los Angeles Lakers, they were out with injuries. The LA Clippers, they were out with injuries. The Denver Nuggets, where Jamal Murray was injured. Before his injuries, the Nuggets were rolling quite a bit. They were playing very, very well. Okay, so I mentioned 4 teams in the West that would have beaten the Bucks, plus the Brooklyn Nets, 5 teams. So usually when a team wins the title, it means they are so dominant and so much better than the field that they win the championship and become NBA champions. But the Milwaukee Bucks had one of the greatest, easiest runs in NBA history due to the injury luck they had. And it is now, I understand if, let's say, they faced the Phoenix Suns and Chris Paul was a little bit banged up or something, I would understand it. But we're talking about teams like the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors, the Nuggets, and the Brooklyn Nets, that all of these teams were teams with injuries to their main stars or superstars. And I cannot consider, therefore, a title where the winning team in the finals, the Milwaukee Bucks, were getting smoked by 40 points by the Brooklyn Nets when they were healthy. When the Atlanta Hawks gave them trouble in the conference finals, which, by the way, that Atlanta Hawks team was one of the weakest teams I've ever seen in the conference finals. So all in all, I'm saying this just to explain that I do believe that the title that Giannis won is one of the weakest I've ever seen. And I'm not saying this to disrespect him, because I believe his titles mean much more than KD's rings, where he ring chased. And I admire Giannis for staying with his franchise and winning with his group of players without any major superstar in his team. But if you think about it, it was Giannis, Middleton, Brook Lopez, and Drew Holiday going against Kevin Durant by himself, going against a Miami Heat that wasn't the same due to playing in the bubble, going against a weak team like the Atlanta Hawks, going against the Phoenix Suns team. You could make an argument that in that NBA Finals, okay, the two best players in the Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and the second and third best players in Milwaukee, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton, you could really make the argument that they are evenly matched. This means that including everything, they're evenly matched, those duos. Drew and Middleton and Chris Paul and Booker are evenly matched, and you have Giannis on top of it. So it wasn't a really fair fight for the Phoenix Suns. And even in that series, I do believe that Giannis got the benefit of the whistle that helped them to dominate the Phoenix Suns. So, okay, guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments, and like, subscribe, and share. Bye.